Okay, looks like we're live. Give me 1 second here. I just want to go and check.
It should be up now.
Yeah, I'm just right. Okay, good evening and welcome to the April 22nd board workshop meeting. Would start off by asking if everybody's had a chance to review the agenda. And are there any changes to the agenda proposed? And failing that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you. And can I have all those in favor? Say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? And Ms. Clendenin, who is on the line, will abstain because she is in her car and we don't want her to be having to go and come backwards and forwards. So we will take, unless we hear otherwise from Amy, we will assume that she abstains from everything. So I'm not going to go back every time and ask that. Okay. First item, celebrations from administrators.
Kathy V, do you want to jump in on that, please? Kathy
Sorry.
V?
Yes. Sorry. 3 high school students have received perfect scores on the ACT. They are Justin Barker, William Hickey, and Emma Roars. Seniors Jaden Fields, Addie Palmquist, Maeve Taylor, and Elise Wilkie Grimm have been named to the National Scholastic Press Association Honor Roll. High school marketing teacher Catherine Laurentius has received the Missouri DECA Diamond Award for her outstanding contributions to the organization's District 9. And Thrive Business Incubator students took top honors recently at the Waterway Pitch Competition. First place went to Sarah Jane Hornberger and Alex Sullivan, and second place to Anthony Pfeiffer, Malachi Parker, and Lamar Jackson.
Thank you, Kathy. And the only other celebration I wanted to add is to celebrate our high school staff who had the prom at Busch Stadium last week for approximately 200 kids. And the amount of work that went into that, really the leader of that effort was Munir Prince, our assistant athletic director, but supported through the administrators and a number of staff who were involved and really made the best of not a great situation. So I was excited that they were able to do that and have a safe experience for the students. So huge kudos to them for their efforts. And I also wanted to highlight too, the Steger staff and administration included that this week worked with Jason and others to provide Camp Wyman, bring the Camp Wyman experience to Steger. And so, last year's students weren't able to do it this past fall, but the fact that they were able to do it in the springtime is pretty awesome. And so seeing the kids up in the trees was pretty neat, and throwing axes and doing the archery. So yeah, huge kudos to all the staff across our entire system that's trying to do what they can to provide great experiences for our children every day. And that's it for me.
Anything else from the administration, John?
Nope.
Okay, that's great. Celebrations from board members. Keita?
Actually, John kind of stole my thunder. I was gonna say that I got to see a lot of the prom pictures. Having a junior at the high school, I got to see a lot of the prom pictures, and all you guys look great. And yes, absolute kudos to parents and students and staff that made all of that happen. I also saw the Camp Wyman at Gibbons. I was taking my walk and I noticed a bunch of ropes in the trees, and I was like, what the heck is going on over there? And then I kind of sat and I watched for a little bit. I didn't watch too long. I didn't want to think I was a stalker, but it looked really, really fun. And then when I found out what it was about, I was like, oh, wow, that is just the neatest thing. I mean, the kids were happy, they were laughing, and just thank you, Mr. Atterbury and staff and teachers and Camp Wyman staff and everybody that made that happen. Kudos to John and central office staff with the vaccination events for the teachers. I'm hearing so many horror stories about 2 and 3 and 4 hour lines, and you guys had that thing organized and it went like that. And thank you for making the space for the teachers and staff and everyone else that was able to participate. Last but not least, I have a 7th grader, so I got to attend the Hickson Outdoor Band concert last week, and that was really cool. Students did really well. And even that situation, having to kind of split them up and do it in, 3 different sections, but still it was a nice evening. It was awesome to sit outside and hear some good music by the students who've been practicing. And thank you to Joe Stevenson and Ms. Tokus over at Hickson for putting that together. And that's it for me.
Great. Thank you, Kita. Christine?
Yes, thank you. Kita, I agree, absolutely. I thought the district was not only generous in making sure that people in the community, as well as all the teachers who needed it, got shots and was part of that process and just saw it and just like the relief people had in the lines that were really quick. So thanks to, I think, Rachel Huertas, who co-led that, or spearheaded that effort, as well as the Nurses Association as well. I wanted to say too, I know because I have a 5th grader graduate, no, I don't think we graduate from Avery, but a 5th grader going to be leaving Avery soon. And so I am seeing parents step up in some really fascinating ways during this pandemic. But certainly as graduations are approaching, like you mentioned with prom, John, parents are really stepping up in some really neat and fascinating and wonderful ways. And so I can't wait to celebrate my 5th grader along with all the others. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Alex?
I was actually going to mention the prom. I've heard some things about it too, so I'm not going to belabor that. But I guess the one thing I would say is kudos to everyone dealing with all the MAP testing. I believe the first week ended this week, so I know logistically things that haven't been as easy as they typically would be. So kudos to everyone working on that.
Alan?
Thanks, David. Yeah, I mean, just want to echo those kudos about MAP testing, prom, those perfect ACT scores. What an achievement by the students, the parents, and the teachers and staff and administrators that have helped them along the way. That's fantastic. 2 other things just to add that I would like to celebrate. First, I have a daughter that's completing 3rd grade, and she is finishing her last strings class. And I wanted to thank the coordinators of strings for pulling together a Zoom concert next week so we can listen to all that they've accomplished and all the progress they've made. Some of us have heard bits and pieces of it from upstairs that they've progressed. Let's just say that, thank goodness. And then finally, I am the liaison to the to the building advisory committee. And they've been doing a lot of work going around surveying all of our buildings and sort of taking note of what needs to be done, but also putting in a lot of work on behalf of the board, putting together real documents for like a handbook and terms and just a lot of logistics to better serve the community so we have a better idea of who's on those committees. So just want to commend the work that they put in, the extra work they put in, along with members of the Financial Advisory Committee as well.
Thank you. Joe?
I would just echo the prom kudos. And I think there was also a parade. At least I was told there was a parade for the seniors. So I'm not sure exactly what that looked like. And the only other thing I'll add is that I was part of the Avery interview process. And I will say that was a really good process. And as challenging as it is to interview on Zoom, I think the district does a really good job and made it as good as it could be under the circumstances. So kudos to everyone involved in that process.
Great, thank you very much. I will, it's not actually strictly the school district, or it's not a district thing, but it's a member of the district. I had the pleasure of hearing Lynn Reef and her band Salt of the Earth at the Garden Cafe last week, and I saw there were a lot of Webster teachers, administrators, as well as some past Webster teachers and administrators who were there supporting her. And so my little plug at Garden Cafe, Friday and Saturday evenings, they have free music there, and it's just it's a wonderful place to go and sit outside and go and do that. The vaccinations, I will say that my son went, actually, we took him down to the Dome to get vaccinated, and that was also really quick. The National Guard and the Marines and the others doing that are really efficient there. Didn't need an appointment, went in. So if people are looking for a place to get vaccinated, no 3-hour lines and no drives to Kirksville there. And yeah, I've heard great things, and it was good to see the pictures from prom and everything else. So thank you very much. Great job to everybody involved. And yeah, and kudos for the vaccinations that were done at the school district. I know that it was difficult for some parents who then had to go and find childcare. We certainly apologize for that, but I do think it was great now that all the teachers who wanted to are able to get vaccinated. And I think that long term, it just makes people feel a lot more comfortable. So good there. All right. Next, I draw everybody to the public comments, and so we have a very large number of public comments in there. Many are related to the issue that we're going to be discussing in a few minutes, social studies curriculum. I know that for all the people who wrote to me, I've tried to respond back for all the comments that Sherry received. I know she has posted them up there. And by the way, I want to thank her. I'd heard from a community member who's having problems accessing those earlier today. And Sherry, and I think it was Tim, worked hard to get those so that people are able to open those. So I have read most, but not all. I've read all but the ones that were all the public comments, but the ones that were added in the last sort of couple of hours or so. But I have been reading those that have been coming in. And I think actually it speaks to the strength of having this public comment. I think that I suspect we wouldn't have had this number of people who would have wanted to show up at a board meeting to go and read their comments, but having them out there and giving people an avenue to go and put their comments out there, I think actually it's a very good way of making sure that if you've got a comment that you want the board to be aware of, you want to get out in the public, this has worked very well as a way to get it out there. And and I know that all the board members have been reading those as well. So thank you very much for all of those. If nobody has any comments about that, I'll move on to board calendar. Okay, John, board calendar.
Yeah, nothing new other than we added that we worked together to come up with that board meeting, retreat meeting on August 5th. So thanks for everybody for helping us pull that, get that date together soon. So other than that, there's nothing new. Have some pretty big events coming up in May, but you have those on your calendar. So
that sounds good. And so for the board retreat, I think we have some ideas as to things. So that's an opportunity to delve into just a small number of things at greater depth. I think with some ideas as to things that that we need to be, as a board, will serve us well to be looking at there. But at the same time, any board members who have, if there's something particular that they'd like us to make sure that we're thinking about either there or at an upcoming board meeting, please make sure that you let Joe and I know, and we will look to accommodate you. Next item, with some sadness, I acknowledge that Amylendernan has submitted her resignation, which will be effective following Amy's last board meeting will be the May the 13th board meeting. We will say more about Amy at that board meeting. And if anybody outside of board members would like to speak at that, please get in touch with me or with Sherry or Joe or John, and we will get you put on the agenda just so that you can make some remarks about Amy, should you so choose to do. I'm sure she's sitting there and thinking, no, please don't do that. She doesn't want to be embarrassed. But as we'll say more later, but she is going to be greatly missed for all of the leadership that she has provided, all the expertise that she has brought to the board. And at a future board meeting, we will talk about the appropriate way to replace her and to fill that seat. Okay. Understand. So we'll have a more formal. We'll talk more formally about Amy at the next board meeting. So next, reports from superintendents and staff, and first the K to K8 social studies curriculum. John.
Yeah, I'm going to get ready and turn it over to Dr. Adams and some of his folks here, but that was something that we had presented to the board last time around, and there was a request to kind of pull it from the consent and just give it another opportunity for the board to ask any questions they have related to it. And as David said, we've heard from a number of people via a number of different channels, their thoughts and feelings regarding it. And with every single person who's responded throughout that process, just like we always do, we always consider what everybody says. And, again, try to make the decisions which we feel are best for the children in the school system. So there were a few things that we wanted to, Dr. Adams will share, and he might have Ms. Daimler and Dr. Rochelle jump in at some point, and then open it up if you have any questions. And if there are no concerns, we'll look following that to have a motion for the board to approve it this evening. Dr. Adams?
Yes, thank you. Thank you all, and good evening to all of you. Once again, I'm joined this evening by Claire Daimler, our K-5 Social Studies Curriculum Coordinator, and Dr. Sherry Rochelle, our 6th through 8th grade Curriculum Coordinator, and also Dr. Williamson, our Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity. So before we begin to share additional resources, I would like to clarify some misconceptions that are out there as a result of the recent article in the Post-Dispatch. The first is that we are not implementing the 1619 project. We are not moving forward with that work. We are moving forward as part of our proposal to you all with the Learning for Justice standards, really to provide a framework for inclusion and also multiple perspectives. And we shared in our last presentation a few weeks ago the importance of using the Missouri Learning Standard really as the basis for our curriculum work, and how the Learning for Justice standard complemented that piece in order to reinforce the importance of that inclusion and the multiple perspective piece. I would also like to clear up a misconception that this curriculum was developed as a result of events this past summer. This curriculum has been a part of an ongoing process even before me, beginning in 2018. And we are now at the point where we are bringing this to fruition and hoping to move forward with implementation in the fall. And so there have also been questions regarding what additional resources were used in the development of the curriculum. And so at this time, I'll share a slide with you. And I'll ask Ms. Daimler and Dr. Rochelle to walk through some of these pieces with you all. And then we will entertain any additional questions that you all might have. So again, can you all see my slide? Just want to make sure everyone's able to see it. Great. So again, I'll start with the first two pieces that I've already mentioned, the Missouri Learning Standards for Social Studies. Those standards were published in 2016. And again, this process started in 2018. And then from there, the Learning for Justice standards were identified again as a framework for inclusion and a framework in order to provide the multiple perspectives that we wanted to make sure were included in our social studies curriculum moving forward. And at this time, I'll ask Dr. Rochelle and Ms. Daimler if they wouldn't mind to speak to some of the other resources that are shared with you.
Sure, I can start out. Claire, jump in anytime. So I can start with the reviewed overarching curriculum documents from other area districts. It's really valuable for us to see how other districts have designed their curriculum, what standards they are assessing, et cetera, so that we get kind of a feel for what's happening everywhere else around us. And then for 6-8 especially, I would say that teacher content knowledge, many of our teachers have specialty degrees. They have been teaching the curriculum, American history or world history, for a very long time. So a lot of the information that is in our curriculum is basically around the knowledge that we all have gained as we've taught materials and also from our specialty degrees. And then Dr. LeGarrette King, we all know, he gave us some input and then we reflected on that and fit in where we thought it was necessary, some of the things that he maybe recommended. History Live is a textbook. It's through a company called TCI, and it is a really diverse kind of textbook that offers lots of different opportunities for kids that have different learning styles, etc. It has activities, they have hands-on kind of simulation activities, and not where they're reenacting a specific event, but how comparing it more to real life things so that they can see, kids can kind of put themselves in the place of how other people may have solved problems in the past. And then ushistory.org offers free textbooks that we really just referred to if we were doubting ourselves whether some content that we were talking about adding in, we wanted to verify that information. So ushistory.org has world history textbooks as well as American history textbooks. And also studentsofhistory.com offers a lot of free text materials and some suggested lessons activities that go along with those things. And that's really just for a reference point to make sure that we were remembering history correctly. And then the OER project is, it has a world history project component, which we really looked at because we wanted to look at world history in a way that shows the interconnectivity around development of civilizations. Because typically when we learn about world history, we learn about civilizations in isolation, and that is not how the world developed. We had civilizations developing at the same time. And so what did they have in common? What was different about them? And why did some civilizations develop technologically further than other ones? So that gave us kind of a framework on how to look at world history in that viewpoint. The National Archives, of course, that's a lot of primary source documents that are really valuable, especially when we're talking about students investigating in historical thinking and inquiry lessons. We want to be able to use as many primary source documents that are available, and the National Archives has many, many, many. The Stanford History Education Group is from Stanford University and known shortly for SHEG, but it is also a source of how to use primary source documents and how to think historically, which is looking at things in context, looking for corroboration of sources, looking at the author, looking for bias, etc. It gives some really good grounding lessons for those things. And then the Smithsonian Institute as well, that also has, or maybe we took that off. Oh, it's down there. Smithsonian has a lot of primary sources as well. And it has a really great learning lab that offers some activities for kids, especially digitally, when we're looking at how we've been learning in the last year. And Claire, please add in anything that you want, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Okay, thanks, Sherry. So for the elementary group, I had a small group of teachers working at each grade level. And so the National Council for the Social Studies, that's a professional organization for social studies educators. So that's an organization or a professional organization that can really lend itself to finding like research on best practice. And so that's kind of how that resource has been used. The next two, the C3 Teachers Inquiry Design Model and the PBL Works, project-based learning, we use that in terms of like how we wanted to frame the units and lessons and activities that we were creating based on the curriculum document that we've proposed to you. And so that's basically when we talk about wanting to design an inquiry-based model or really promote critical thinking, we wanted to use those frameworks to design those things. Beyond that, the other items on this list are really used as resources for both information as well as ideas. C-SPAN, I'm sure you're familiar with. iCivics is an organization that was actually founded by Justice Sandra Day O'Connor in terms of promoting civic education in the United States and everywhere. And actually, the Annenberg classroom that you see a couple down also provides lesson plans, resources, videos also regarding the Constitution. Our Missouri History Museum is a rich resource of not only primary documents, but also their Educator Resource Center is amazing. And several of our facilitators have gone to different programs that they've offered, as have our students. I added Osage Nation because our second grade team was so, they were being so careful to, when we're talking about Indigenous peoples or we're talking about world cultures, they were really being purposeful in trying to find resources and material that are written or created by people of those cultures, right? And so Osage Nation, I wanted to give you that example because they provide a whole K-12 resources, lessons, and our team really used that. Kid Citizen is a resource that uses really photographs from the National Archives and it's for K-5 students and asks them to look at history through the lens of the photographs that are of those times. And then Time for Kids is based on, it's, Time Magazine for kids. And then on your right, education.com, Teaching Channel, Scholastic, and also teachervision.com. Those again it's like when you're wanting to create something, well, what else is out there? And so that's really been used for just brainstorming purposes. And then this one, Ducksters.com, it gives you timelines. So we were looking back again, how Dr. Rochelle had mentioned, like, is our timeline correct? We got to make sure we're, this is right. So that was really used, and it's kid friendly. So if kids want to use it, they can. So these are some of the resources that have been used in both developing the curriculum as well as thinking about how we want to bring that to life in the classroom.
Thank you, Claire and Sherry. And I would just like to take a moment to acknowledge both Dr. Rochelle and Ms. Daimler and our teacher facilitators for all of their hard work over the past few years in putting this proposal together for you all. And so I just wanted to acknowledge their work. So thank you to you both and to the teachers. And at this time, we'll take any additional questions that the board might have.
Great. So just I've got a couple of just more housekeeping questions just before we go around the board. First, the websites that you listed, I'm presuming that most of those are available, so anybody could go. You don't need a password or anything to go and look at them, and so anybody who wants to go and look and see sort of what this broad variety of sources that you've got is can go and work out what's going on and can see what the source material is you're drawing from.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you very much. And second, is that slide that you posted there that has those sources on it, is that posted under the public content for this? Is that contained in the in that K-8 social studies presentation PDF, or is that just the PDF from what you did before? So if you could make sure that that is out there, because again, I think that if we can give parents the opportunity to go and see these things that you've got, I think it just informs a lot better. Okay, I'm going to just go around the board in turn and just sort of give everybody, if they've got questions, a chance to ask them. So Keita?
I don't really have any questions. I do just want to thank Dr. Adams and Claire and Sherry and everyone else who participated. Dr. Williamson, I know you guys worked super hard at this. And I want to thank you really also for having the courage to make a change. Change isn't easy. And it often comes and brings a lot of fear. And I think that that is really what's kind of driving some of the things behind people who are questioning this work. But I think that they will find that there's really nothing to be afraid of. Our kids are in very, very capable and competent hands. Our teachers are great, and even some of them are probably a little bit intrepid because it's new for them as well. But I mean, it's all of this is new, so there may be some missteps, but hey, you know, that's when you write yourself and you keep moving. If you think the kids aren't already talking about this stuff, you're sorely mistaken. They're talking about all this kind of stuff on TikTok and Snapchat, and they're learning stuff on YouTube. And personally, I would much rather have one of our teachers lead them through this than some kind of algorithm. And so I'm actually very excited about it. And I thank you all. And I thank the community members who are in support and who are also courageous to start the conversations and be willing to take the step into new territory as well. That's all I'll say.
Thank you very much. Christine.
Thank you. I want to echo what Keita said in terms of thanking you, Dr. Adams, Dr. Rochelle, and Claire as well as your teams, because I know you put 3 years of hard work into this curriculum, and you clearly used a lot of resources. I don't have any questions at this time. I did ask questions last time. My main concern is that, you know, that teachers are professionally developed and trained and able to handle these conversations, because this is really important that students be able to have these conversations. And I really appreciate too that a number of community members reached out to me. As a parent, I certainly support this, and as a board member, I support this. And I would have another comment, just that we saw last time, I can't remember why, but we saw a list of names, and I saw one of my sheroes up there. I saw Eleanor Roosevelt, and almost got tears in my eyes because I thought, wow, I don't remember learning about Eleanor Roosevelt in school. But to be able to see myself in the curriculum is really powerful. And that this curriculum provides students an opportunity to see themselves is really powerful. And I just appreciate it and I support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alex.
Yeah, likewise, I'd say I asked my questions last time. I think I just wanted to, I personally wanted to better understand the sources just based off of some of the questions that we've received from the community over the past few weeks. So I really appreciate all of you explaining the sources for the new curriculum. I think one of the things that I would say that's not necessarily related to the curriculum, but you know, prior to there was an article today in the Post-Dispatch that spoke about the curriculum. It spoke about a couple different things, and we received a huge amount of support. You can go look in the public comments for today and see that. But prior to that, we heard from, you know, I'd say a smaller minority of people who were worried or not sure or scared about this change. And so what I would ask for any community members that are listening is, if you are in support of something that we are doing, let your voice be heard, because too often do you hear from the people that don't want change. And in all cases, some cases maybe we are moving too quickly, but I think in this one, we are doing something that is absolutely right. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Alan.
David, yeah, I just also wanted to echo thanks to Dr. Adams, Dr. Rochelle, Claire, and the rest of the teachers and staff that spent so much time and energy and effort, you know, sort of evaluating what we had and looking for best practices and other resources and good information that we could compile into something that works for us in our district. I think that is incredibly important. It's something that I support wholeheartedly. I think that, you know, one of the things that I'm excited about when you start thinking about these lists of resources and the things we're doing, the project-based learning and the C3T, the inquiry-based learning, I think really giving the curriculum all different perspectives and all those lenses through which to view history, then you layer those other tools on top of it, you're going to really help our students with their critical thinking skills and with their ability to be able to decipher information and figure out, you know, what's real and what's right, and let them form their own opinions and, you know, to really develop their brain in that way, which is so important as we think about, you know, as a district, we're here trying to prepare students to be, you know, good, productive citizens in the 21st century, right? As community members that can be engaged and responsive and you know, help us move our communities forward. So thank you for all your effort and your time. I appreciate it and very much supportive of the revisions.
Thank you, Alan. Joe.
So yeah, I will just echo some of what has already been said in terms of I appreciate the new curriculum. I do think it's the right thing to do. I was walking with my 2016 graduate from Webster Groves High School who said today, and I did not bring this up in this context, but he said, I just wish when we learned about history, it wasn't just memorizing a bunch of facts, because it doesn't make you love history, and so many people love history. And so I feel like this curriculum is going to lend to more of a understanding history and being able to appreciate it rather than just memorizing dates and people's names and that kind of thing. I do have one question. I know there was some concern or questions about the Southern Poverty Law Center being a source, and I didn't see that on the source list. Did we use that, or can you just clarify that?
That's Learning for Justice, I think, isn't it?
Yes, so the Learning for Justice standards are a framework that are a product of the Southern Poverty Law Center. We shared in our last presentation that even though we're using that as a resource, which other districts across the country, across the city also use as a resource, we are not advocating on behalf of the Southern Poverty Law Center. We are not aligning ourselves as a district with them. We are using this one single resource as a framework for inclusion in multiple perspectives.
And I really just asked that question because I'm sure there are people listening that are wondering. And so I think it is good to point out that that's just one of, I don't know how many were on that list, a lot of resources. So just another voice that we're putting into the picture, which is a good thing in my opinion. So again, thank you so much for all your hard work. I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be good.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I just as I look at it, so first, thank you very much for that exhaustive list. I think for me that was very helpful. I think that the more sort of sources we can draw on in a way that, I mean, makes sense. I think it just enriches the curriculum. I think one of the things that strikes me here, so in addition to just sort of the broadening in terms of what it is we're teaching, it's also the idea that we will review our teaching methods as well. And so I think that one of the things that is important is not just in our social studies, but across the curriculum as we think about how we are teaching. And you know, there's a lot of change that's gone on, and I know that all the teachers are going and doing that. And so my personal view is that all curriculum and the way that we teach, that's going to be something that's evolving over time. So this is sort of one piece of that evolution. We're going to be seeing lots of other things coming through that you're going to recommend, both in terms of what we cover in curriculum, but in terms of what we actually, the way we deliver that as well. So comments about project-based learning, projects about, you know, some of the work we did on School for Tomorrow before, and some of these things. And these just represent a lot of great opportunities to improve the way, you know, primarily what we're here for. We're here to try to enable our students when they leave to be the best citizens, the most productive citizens they can. And all of these things and improving the inquiry and everything else is going to go and help that. So just in terms of the curriculum, thank you very much. I think you've addressed, you know, all of the questions that I had, all the questions other had. I think you've done a great job here. I echo what everybody else has said in terms of all the hard work that that everybody has done. And I know that we'll be looking at this and other aspects of the curriculum again, and you'll be coming back and you'll be telling us what has worked, and you'll be telling us what, where there is, as we like to say, room for improvement, and that's how we'll get better. So thank you very much for everything that you've done there. If no other board members have a comment, and I'll just look, I don't see that. I will entertain a motion at this point.
Make a motion to approve the K-8 social studies curriculum as presented.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you very much. And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I noticed that
I'm
Amy.
an aye as well. This is
Yep,
Amy.
absolutely. No, I noticed you'd come off mute. I'm sorry, Amy, did you have any comments you wanted to make, by the way?
I don't. I think you all said it very well, and I don't want to repeat. Although the one thing I will share is that as I'm listening to this conversation, the first thing that popped in my mind and stayed with me throughout was the voice of my friend and former board colleague Emerson Smith, who have said it's about damn time. I'm tired of talking about these things. Let's start doing them. So, in that spirit, I just want to be on the record as voting yes as well.
Absolutely. Okay. So that passes unanimously. Again, thank you very much to everybody who has been a part of this, and we look forward to hearing from you again as to how it is all working and how it is all rolling out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job.
Okay. Item 3.02, the budget adjustment.
Good evening. Give me
Good
a moment
evening.
here. I'll share my screen.
We can see it. It's
Okay,
good.
there we go.
I even recognize at least one of those faces.
So this year, we probably have more adjustments than we would normally bring to you, but due to the pandemic, there are several accounts that need to be adjusted. So we'll just kind of go through them. And then at the end, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. So Prop C sales tax, we are getting a little bit more than originally projected in Prop C sales tax. We get paid per ADA. It's basically a per student amount where we put 1,035 in the budget. Desi is saying that could be as high as 1,048 this year. So I do believe that's still a conservative number for us to use. Interest earnings. Interest, we feel like we need to deduct that again. We reduced that account in half when you adopted the budget in June. We reduced it again in December, and we're back to you saying we need to reduce it again. Interest earnings are almost zero right now. It's really kind of sad the amount of interest revenue we're earning. Lunch, a la carte, we reduced that by $80,000. When we brought to you the budget adjustment in December, we were still thinking that possibly high school students would be in session for the fourth quarter, and they are a large part of our a la carte revenue, but that did not happen, so we had to reduce that. Student activities, not as many activities, not as many fundraisers done by the activities, the sports group and those sort of things. So we reduced that. That is a budget though. We budgeted $2 million on the revenue side and $2 million on the expenditure side for those student activities. So you'll see in a minute that we've also reduced the expenditures. The facility usage, we reduced that again because we still weren't able to open up the buildings to the same amount of facility usage we had in the past. Adventure Club tuition, after reviewing that needed to be reduced again by $100,000. The program is open, but we do not have as many participants as we had hoped. CSD Insurance Trust credit. I think most of you know that we belong for our medical insurance to the CSD Insurance Trust. It's a consortium of area school districts. They had a very good year. They had low claims, so they were able to issue the district a credit of $228,000. So we increased that line item for that. Then the basic formula and classroom trust funds. If you remember back in July, the governor had withholdings. We've kind of thought all year most of it was going to come back, at least for the last several months. And Desi is saying Yes, it should be, if not fully funded by the end of the year, very close. So we're using in our budget funding at 99%, which is an additional $460,000 for the district. Fines, we reduced that by 8,000 to what we actually received. That's a revenue stream that is pretty much all over the place from year to year. It could be 30,000, it could be 60, 70,000. It just depends on the fines that are collected throughout the state. Railroad and utility, that revenue stream is $24,000 lower than what we had budgeted. Usually that goes up every year, and it did not go up at all this year. The county has not really had any guidance to give us as to why that happened, but that happened to other school districts in St. Louis County also. Food service, state and federal, our participation was just not where we thought it was going to be, so we were reducing those accounts by 150,000. Title III, we're adding 43,000, and that is just to get that in line with our allocation from DESE. And we did receive some money from FEMA for that grant we applied. We originally applied last April for that grant, so it's taken a little while, but we did get $35,000. And I just got notice in the mail yesterday that they are going to issue us another $12,000. So we have a total reduction in revenue of almost $754,000. Now to move on to the expenditures. Salary and benefits, after all of those accounts were analyzed, it was determined that benefits, medical insurance needed to be increased by $10,680. Under professional services, there are a lot of different accounts in that category. I just listed some of the biggest ones that were adjusted here. Tuition to other districts was reduced by $133,000. That is mainly what we pass through to Epworth and Great Circle. The students that are educated at those institutions in our district, we receive funding from DESE from them, then we turn around and write a check to Epworth and Great Circle, basically just pass those funds through. DESE did not reimburse us much this year, so we reduced that. Our telephone account was over budget, over budget, so we increased that. Most of that, though, came from our electric account, which is in the supplies category because it was under budget. Property insurance, we also were able to reduce that insurance category by $52,000. Music, our insurance providers also had a low claims year, so they issued us a credit when we got our yearly bill from them in December. Transportation, we reduced that by $125,000. We have a few less students riding than normal, and as you know, we didn't have bus service at the very beginning of the year. And then there were miscellaneous other accounts that were increased or decreased. Most of the maintenance and grounds accounts there in that area were increased, and that money came from the capital outlay section where we just transferred money in their budget from one account to another. There was no budget change. In the supply category, student activity, it makes up the most of that. As I mentioned earlier, we reduced the revenue and the expenditure side, and then we reduced the other main area was the electric account that was reduced. In the capital outlay section, we increased the land the district purchased, as you know, that piece of property next to Clark. We increased that account then by $270,000. And then we moved some money from the maintenance and grounds capital outlay area to their professional service area. So we had a total reduction of expenditure accounts of almost $1.1 million. Any questions before I move on? Just interrupt if anyone thinks of anything. So if we look at the entire budget, our revenues at almost 67 million, expenditures are at 86.1, but we have to remember that includes the $18 million that we had in there for bond expenditures. Those bond proceeds were received last fiscal year. So that shows a negative $19 million, but that's a little misleading, a little alarming just to look at that. But we have to remember that $18 million for Prop E. If we break that apart and just look at the operating funds, which is the general, the teachers, and the capital projects fund, we have $61.3 million in revenue, just about $81 million, in expenditures. But then we need to take those bond amounts out of here. So if we do that, we end up with a deficit of $1.7 million. We'll carry that forward as we've been discussing all year. The Walter Ambrose Family Center is operating at a deficit this year, but they have their own reserves that are going to pay for that deficit. And when we planned their programming, we knew that this was going to be the effect this year. So if we take that out of our deficit because they have their own reserves, that brings us to a $718,000 deficit. And if you remember at the December budget adjustment, we increased the budget by $433,000, which was budget carryover for the buildings, the school buildings from last year's budget. So they had money they didn't spend in last year's budget. We added to this year's budget. If we back that out of there, we're up to a negative balance of $284,000. That's up from $600,000 in December. And we added the $270,000 for the land purchase in there. And that land purchase is something that we were all okay with if we used our reserves for that, because that is a good way to spend those reserves on those one-time expenditures. So we're moving in the right direction. And as you know, the trend is each year that we'll have many accounts where all of the funds will not be spent. So I would expect this to improve as the year progresses. Child nutrition, as we've been talking about, it is expected right now to have about a $350,000 deficit. That is included in those budget numbers. That's not on top of anything that we've already discussed. That's just because the number of meals served is down right now. And a big chunk of that is a la carte. We had $200,000 budgeted for a la carte revenue, and that just wasn't able to happen this year with the high school not being in session for lunch. So this budget reflects a fund balance of 50.5%. When DESE calculates that, that just looks at the general fund and the teacher's fund, which is up from 48.9% in December. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from anybody? I'll just note also, thank you. I was at the Finance Advisory Committee and took everybody through that as well. And I think everybody there as well was appreciate the clear way in which you put this out there. So thank you very much.
No questions. We'll just need a motion to approve the adjustments as presented.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the budget adjustments as presented?
I move we approve the budget adjustment as presented.
And a second.
Second.
Thank you, Keita. All in favor? Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, and so that passes. Thank you very much. Okay. Did you have anything else, Pam? Was that it?
Not on the budget adjustment. That was it.
Okay. All right. So next we have the initial draft budget and the multi-year projections. And I can see your screen.
Okay, so we'll take a look at where we're at right now in planning the budget for next school year. We have a lot of the accounts solidified, but there are some areas as we get additional information from the county or from the state, we may have to adjust. And there's a couple of other areas that I'll explain that we're still reviewing as we go through this presentation. So as you know, our budget goals are to provide the resources to promote a learning environment that's challenging for all of our students. We want to make sure we have strong fiscal and operational management. We want to maintain our class sizes. We want to incorporate salaries that align with the goal of being 3 to 5% over the St. Louis County median. Our teachers currently are 5% over that St. Louis County median mark. All other groups are 3%. And as we've discussed before, we very much want to get them all to that 5% mark, but we are also very aware of our budget constraints right now. But that is still a goal that we have to reach that 5% mark for all employees. And of course, we want to maintain a competitive employee benefit package. We'll start by looking at revenue. So local revenue, the biggest area is our current and delinquent tax revenue. That is estimated to increase by 2.1% next year for all funds. We're using a collection rate of 97.5%. That's down from the 97.8 we used in the fiscal year that we're in right now. I'm using the numbers that we received from the assessor's office in March, except for the fact that we reduced the commercial number. There was a conversation, a group of CFOs met with the assessor. He said that the commercial assessed valuation numbers were high and we shouldn't rely on that high number. So we reduced that down to our December number plus our new construction in commercial. And that's what we use to calculate the tax rate and then the revenue. That shows an increase in operating revenue of approximately $740,000. And that's estimated to be 64.3% of the entire operating budget. But we will need to adjust this after we receive solid assessed valuation numbers from the county, and then we will recalculate the tax rate in September and bring that to you to be approved. Prop C sales tax, we're expecting an increase in that category of $97,000. We used in this year we're in right now, $1,035 per weighted ADA. Next year we're using $1,050. The merchants and manufacturing tax, we're not expecting a change there. Transportation fees, increasing that by $10,000 because we will have transportation for the whole year next year. Interest, a slight decrease even from where we're at right now for that budget next year. Local food service, we're increasing that to back to where it was to pre-COVID levels. The local areas, if a student pays for a lunch, that's where that revenue goes. So we're increasing that. Since right now everyone gets a free lunch, although since we developed the budget and I did this presentation, I received an email stating that that may be continued through next year. The free lunches may be continued. So if that happens, we'll reverse these revenues back, lower local and increase federal. So I'll have more information for you on that when we bring the budget back for your approval in June. Student activity receipts, increasing them back to the level that they were prior to the budget adjustment we just did for this current year. Then in the community other area, the Adventure Club program and the Walter Ambrose Family Center preschool program are there. We put those back to the pre-COVID levels of revenue, but we still are in the process of fully evaluating those programs. So there may be some adjustments that need to be made to those revenue accounts. Fines and state assessed utilities, we just did a slight increase to those two areas. If we look at state revenue, the largest area there is our state formula in the classroom trust fund, which makes up approximately 14% of the budget. So that is paid on a state adequacy target. DESE is saying that's going to be $6,375 next year. They're expecting funding to be at 100%. So that's what we used in the budget. We're using our weighted ADA from last year, because what you do in the formula, you use the highest of either your current year or your preceding 2 years, and last year was higher, so we're still using last year in this forecast for next year. The total amount of revenue is expected to decrease by $140,000 due to the lower enrollment in summer school that's expected this summer. If that would happen to go up, then we would increase that and we would receive that additional revenue. I also wanted to point out, as I mentioned, we're using, because our enrollment dropped this year, last year's ADA was higher, we're using that number. If our enrollment doesn't go back up to those levels that it was at pre-COVID, we could lose over $1 million next year in revenue. So that is something that we'll really be keeping an eye on through the school year next year. Transportation, we did lower that by $1,000, went from $4,000 to $3,000. In the state category, that's a really small revenue stream for us. Parents as teachers, we are not expecting a change in that revenue. Then federal funds, again, we decreased this, anticipating that the free meal program would no longer be available and students will be paying for lunch, but I put a note here that it may end up coming back. If it does, we'll just have to adjust those revenue accounts. Medicaid, that is a new revenue stream that we had this year. We estimated we would get 15,000, but this year we've already received 30. So we're increasing that next year by 15,000. So it is also at the $30,000 level. Title I, we do not have allocations from DESE at this time, but those federal funds are generally offset by equal expenditures for programs. That's not always the case. Sometimes the district puts some money in. So right now we're just using estimates for that. Federal grants, if we look at, as you know, in the year we're in right now, we had several CARES COVID-related grants. There are no grants included in the budget next year at this time. I first really wanted just to get a look to make sure, could we have a balanced budget without those grants, without being dependent on those grants, which are just one-time monies? But I did want to share with you that we have been allocated for ESSER 2 just about $965,000. We have until September 30th of 2023 to spend that money. We've also been told that there's an ESSER 3 grant allocation. That actual amount has not been released yet, but we were told to expect about 2 times or 2.2 times the ESSER 2 amount. So that revenue stream should be about $2 million. But like I said, that final allocation is not out yet. They give us a lot of flexibility on how we want to use that money. We can use it for salaries and benefits if we need to, supplies, air purification systems, if there's some other maintenance type things that we need to do. They did say with the ESSER 3, they would like us to use 20% of that on things that directly relate to loss of instruction during the pandemic. So those are all things that we'll be looking at the next several months. Any revenue questions before I move on to expenditures? Okay, expenditures. So we did the salary improvements, as I mentioned earlier, to get us to that goal of being 3% to 5% over the county median salary. We have a 1.5% estimated increase in health insurance. I say estimated because we won't have those final rates until May. But Willis Towers Watson, our broker, is really pretty confident that we're going to have a 1.5% increase, which is just phenomenal. The trust that we are in has 5 tiers for the increase, and we're right in the middle. We were at that higher tier, getting a higher increase, but our loss ratios have decreased, and now we're in the middle tier. So it's great that we only have a 1.5% increase. We're expecting then a 4% decrease in dental insurance. Then, of course, we have an increase in retirement, Medicare, and Social Security because of the raises in the salary amounts. Expenditure considerations, our purchase services area is expected to go up about $100,000, and that's mainly due to the increase in transportation next year, since we plan on having bus services all year next year. In the supply area, gas and electric counts were increased by 10%. Other supplies were decreased about $250,000, but the majority of that is because we took out that budget carryover from last year that we added into this year's budget. Capital outlay accounts were decreased. We had some funds in there for Prop E projects in case there were change orders and things like that. We decreased them. We are still analyzing all of these areas to determine if any additional adjustments should be made. Take a looking at the debt service fund. The revenue in there is basically tax revenue, and then we pay our bond and interest payments out of this fund. You can see in 2021, we expected a surplus of just under 500,000. 21-22, a surplus of closer to 700,000. So as you can see, that debt service fund and our tax rate in there is sufficient to continue supporting those payments. It will continue to support our amortization schedule for the next several years. And we will also have an opportunity for a no tax increase bond issue in the future. The summary of all the accounts, our revenue accounts, are at $70,171,000. Expenditures at $72.5 million, leaving a deficit of $2.3 million. But again, we're planning we'll still have some of those Prop E expenditures to pay, and that's just about $3 million. So if we take that out of there, the overall budget will have a balanced budget next year. If we look at just the operating fund, so that's the general fund, the teachers fund, the capital projects fund, we're at about $64.5 million for all of our revenue categories. And if we look at just kind of breaking that down, you can see current and delinquent taxes, how much we rely on them. That is 64% of that total operating budget, within state revenue being the next largest category at 15%. But of course, as we add in those ESSER funds next year, the federal category, which is the green small one here, will increase. And here are operating expenditures, also just about at $64.5 million. We ended up with a balanced budget by just $817, but we are, like I said, still analyzing accounts, and we'll let you know if we find any other accounts that need to be adjusted. Then we look at operating expenditures. I had to take a second look at this because our largest area here is salaries, which is also 64%. The next largest category then here is this gray area, which are our other benefits. So retirement, Medicare, Social Security, and then the gold area, purchase services, and then health insurance, the orange at 8% is the next largest category. So if we take a look at this, and I know this is a lot of information on a slide, the yellow area is the 21-22 budget, and here at the bottom, it shows that $817 surplus. And then just trying to take a look at what will things look like the next couple of years, trying to project out. Next year is a non-reassessment year, so expect current and delinquent taxes won't increase as much as this year. Total revenues going up 1.26%. When I look at salaries, I increase them by 2.4%. Health insurance, 4%. I know we only had the 1.5% next year, but in case it goes up, we've got 4% in there for the next 2 years. Other benefits then will go up too. I should point out over here, so the other benefits category is going down in our budget for next year, but after we analyze that, we've determined that we had a little bit too much in that category budgeted this year, so that's why that's seen a decrease next year overall. And then we're showing purchase services going up 1%, supplies hopefully can hold pretty steady, gas and electric going up 5%, and that's going to come to a deficit of $673,000. I would be hopeful, though, as we get closer to that, we'd be able to tweak some of these accounts, hopefully have some good numbers from revenue that hopefully, just like this year, we were originally anticipating this would be a deficit. I'm hopeful that as we would get closer, we'd be able to get that up a little bit closer to a balanced budget. Those same figures going out to the next year, we come to $1 million deficit. The only difference in the year 23-24 I have on here is that current and delinquent taxes should go up because that's another reassessment year. But the concern is here with that state revenue. I did not show a decrease there, but if our enrollment doesn't go back up to the pre-pandemic enrollment numbers, we could lose $1 million to $1.5 million in state revenue in 23-24. So that's just definitely something that we've got to keep an eye on. And here, just to share with you that DESE ASBR fund balance calculation, we ended 19-20 at 54.95%. The 2021 budget is showing 50.5%. And as I explained earlier, I think that will actually be a little bit higher as not all of our expenditure categories are spent. And then the 21-22 preliminary budget is showing a 48.08% fund balance. So we still have very, very healthy reserves that would weather us through really almost any kind of financial uncertainties that we could see in the next couple of years. But really right now, things are really looking pretty good for our budget. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from anybody? Alan.
I have one, Pam. I think I didn't see it in there, but this year is a reassessment year, correct?
Correct.
Have you gotten any sense from the assessor's office yet what to expect? I know I've heard from several taxpayers and members of the community that they've already been getting letters about significant increases and just didn't know what you had heard from the assessor's office about that.
Yeah, so he has, because we received numbers in March that we used to calculate our preliminary non-bond binding tax rate. That was showing residential going up about, it was 7.8%, almost 8%. Commercial went up 18%, but that's the area that the assessor said we really can't rely on that increase. He really doesn't think that's going to be that high. When I guess that when they run it through their computer model, it shows what increase it thinks it should be. But as they go through and actually visit all the commercial properties, they do not think the increase is going to be that high. The other thing that's hurting us is that when we calculate that tax rate, we're capped by that consumer price index. And this year it went down to 1.4%. So even if residential is going up, let's say even 5%, we are capped at the we can receive the revenue from new construction. That was about $3 million in the residential category, but we cannot receive more than 1.4% increase for just an increase in assessed valuation on property.
Is that price index cap, did that go down? Is that pandemic related is the reason it went down?
Yeah, I think so. And it hasn't been very high the last couple of years. I think it was 2.1 or 2 last year, 1.9 the couple of years before that. So it's not been real high, but 1.4 is really low. And it's really kind of disappointing to see our assessed valuation rates going up more than that, knowing that we can't capture that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I think it's always good to see. It may only be $817, but it's a positive number. And certainly if we can manage to sort of keep going with what we've got, it's good if we aren't having to look at a tax increase anytime soon. I realize eventually the math does catch up with us. All right, thank you very much. Okay, I think update on second semester. Do you need a, you don't need a motion for that, do you? No, okay, good. All right, update on second semester learning and student programming. Dr. Simpson.
And great job with both those, Pam. Continue to do a great job leading us in that particular area. And very blessed to have you in the district, so thank you. Update on second semester, just a few things. Second semester and beyond, a little more beyond, I guess, this time. But again, like many of you highlighted, we were super enthusiastic to do the vaccinations of our staff. And again, the kudos to all that you had mentioned. I do believe that those, along with those vaccinations, along with others that have been getting vaccinated, have contributed to our numbers, which have looked pretty darn good lately. Both in our staff as well as our students. And I will say that we have been actively supporting our students who are eligible for vaccination in getting vaccinated. And it's my hope that sometime before too long that the number will drop down to 12 to 16 for vaccination. So we will see on that, but again, kudos all around. I did want to share two things that are tied to next year, really. The first one is just our programming in 21-22, as a lot of school districts are still trying to determine what that looks like. But I think there is a consensus amongst school systems that school districts will be in session K through 12 all day. And so that's what we're planning on doing regardless, but I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. Our high school is the only group that is not back at this point, but we do feel strongly that they will be able to be back full-time next year. Now, are we still going to have different provisions in place in support of a safe return for students? Yeah, it's highly likely likely that we are. What we are going to do is again, because we feel at this point, based on data, based on research, based on experience, that we can do school safely. We are right now leaning towards, again, having our children back. Students that will want a virtual option would have a virtual option via the MOCAP program in grades K through 12. And unless our need says otherwise, that's the route that we're thinking that we do for virtual learning. So what we were going to do is we sent out some preliminary data surveys pre-vaccination. It was mid to late February. and we shared that data with you. We had a total of 42 students that parents selected that they would want to be in the virtual program. Of the 13 or 1400 responding, we're going to reach back out to families to see, like, where do you stand now? And so if our numbers dictate that we need to adjust our staffing to accommodate for a virtual learning experience for students with Webster teachers, well, then that's something that we're going to have to look to try and do. Again, being mindful of our resources, being mindful of our budget. But if they look similarly to what they did in late February, there's more of a likelihood that we'll probably utilize some of the virtual providers that exist out there. So just kind of wanted to give the board an opportunity to offer any thoughts or wisdom. Again, that's kind of what our thinking is at the moment, but certainly always open to your thoughts and suggestions.
Anybody have any comments or questions? Christine.
John, you were mentioning fall, and I was curious if you know anything yet about summer. I know there were some dates that had expired in terms of signing up for summer school. Was just wondering what it would look like.
Yeah. John and Thomas, do you want to jump in and share a little bit what summer school experience will look like and the numbers will look like? There he is.
You bet. So our numbers for summer school are looking really strong for our in-person learning. You know, obviously last year we had to pivot and go virtual with everything, but our elementary numbers are well over 400 students, whereas when we did it 2 years ago, it was around the 325 number. And then our Hickson numbers are around 125. And then our high school numbers, again, for in-person, are about what they've been in the past as well. We're also offering a virtual option through launch, and we have about 40 students taking advantage of that as well. And then we also have a Celebrate Reading program that will be taking place in the afternoons opposite of C, our elementary program, and that's for students who are identified as needing the extra reading support. And so those families are receiving those invitations and signing up for that program as well. And then something new that we're adding to the programming this year is something that SSD is offering for students who have an IEP. It's called USS, Universal Student Supports. And we have about 30 students, first through 12th grade, who will be participating in that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay,
Okay, I'm
forward to once we have that data and information and a firm grasp on what we're planning to do, we'll come back to you.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm excited by the idea that we will be able to get the high school students back in person for those who want to be there. I think that whilst we've made great strides virtually, I still think in person is clearly the preferred option.
Yeah.
All right.
Can I share one more thing?
Oh, please go ahead.
One more thing. I just wanted to share the team at Webster Groves High School has been working on putting together a new model, a new schedule for the school. And I'm super enthusiastic about it. And so are many of them. And so I wanted to share my screen, show you what that model is, and speak to it a little bit. So those of you that have had high school students or just know what the schedule has looked like in the past, this year was a little bit different. We went to a 4-block schedule. And we did the whole semester thing. You knew that. That was a pandemic related decision that would minimize traffic and contacts and all kinds of things. What they're moving towards for next semester, Matt, Dr. Irvin just contacted families. Tomorrow the students will learn firsthand, is they're moving to what's called a modified block schedule. The modified block, as you can see, it's simply explained. 3 of the days, each of the students are going to have 7 classes, and I believe they're 51 minutes in length, most of them. And so in the past, they've had the 7-day drop schedule where they did the 6 classes and then they dropped one. Well, this time around, they're going to do all of their courses 3 days a week for 51 minutes each. On those those 2 days where you'll see the blocks, the B day and the C day there, they are going to, as you can see on the B day, they're going to have, the kids will have 4 courses, and that'll rotate between which classes they are. They're for an extended period of time. And then on that additional, that 5th day of the week, they are introducing, which I'm super excited about, an advisory period and these academic networking times. These will be for the entire student body. So for those academic networking times, those are designed to completely support students in their learning. So whether it's students working on with others in projects, students working on homework, whether it's students getting extra help, it's staff members coordinating times to meet with students, like appointments, students coordinating times with staff. There's a lot of our children that for one reason or another are just unable to do it or don't, because those times often are outside the school day, or they're at somebody's lunch and there's a conflict. So it provides that opportunity every single week for those connections and that support to occur. Again, whether it's student initiated, whether it's teacher initiated, it's going to be really neat. And the other piece is that advisory period. And that advisory period, which they're still trying to determine how that advisor is selected, it's kind of like homeroom, where it's going to be a group of students who are always coming together every single week with an adult. Ideally, somebody, if not the trusted adult right now, somebody who becomes the trusted adult to help students with anything that they might need, whether it's they're looking at colleges or they're struggling with one thing or another, just having that support for them. That's a space where we can have some of our social emotional development and learning experiences, team building experiences. Again, it's a group of kids who will always be, group of young people who will always be coming together. And really with a focus on the health and the well-being of the children. And again, having that contact with that one person who gets to know them really well. And so I'm super excited about it. And I know a lot of people are really excited about this particular opportunity. So any questions related to that's it for my sharing.
Go ahead, Alan.
Just have one question, John, about the schedule. Can you speak to why the 3 days where they're in their classes, all their classes, that it's Monday, Tuesday, Friday, as opposed to Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or those types of things? Why are they 2 grouped together beginning of the week and then Friday?
Yeah, and Alan, I don't believe, and Dr. Irwin can speak better to that, I don't believe it's that simple. So I think it's somehow going to rotate so that within that 5-day span, but I don't know.
Okay.
To be honest, I can find that out though.
Okay, yeah, just curious.
Yeah. It's kind of a rotating AABCA schedule. So yeah, I'll ask the rationale for that. And
it's probably similar. I mean, at one point, elementary specials rotated in a similar way. It's probably a similar rotation then, I guess.
Yeah.
Putting my elementary student hat on, I can probably picture it that way.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if it's because you typically have more Mondays and Fridays off.
Yeah.
I don't know, but then so AAB, whatever the thing is, it's not always going to be Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, correct? Like if it's a 4-day week, will that roll around?
That's what I'm going to find out, Joe. And
okay.
I think you're right. I don't think it is always going to be on the same day. I think it's going to rotate. But I'm going to find that out and I'll get back out to you.
John, was any thought given to sticking with more of the model that we've had this year, where you have longer periods for specific classes, as opposed to sort of and perhaps trying to do less classes in a day but longer periods for those classes?
I think there was. I think the feedback that they felt this year was that there are a lot of courses that are better spread out over the course of the year for a lot of different reasons, and not having all the content kind of put into a 3-month, because again,
I wasn't thinking, sorry, I wasn't thinking about that. I was more thinking instead of trying to do 7 classes in a day, one day do 4 classes and then, do 4 classes a day, 4 classes a day, but just having a longer period of time each day for that class, not trying to jam it so that you do the entire class in sort of in a month or in 2 months.
So you're saying to have just a regular block schedule like that B and C day, as opposed to
yes, yeah, but not necessarily trying to do a drop one. Trying to do perhaps just 4 classes a day or something like that.
Yeah, I know they considered all types of models, but I didn't ask what the rationale was for not doing that. But again,
okay.
I can the answer to that.
All right, not important.
Yeah,
I guess the reason I asked the question is, again, for children who have issues with transitions, fitting 7 classes in a day versus 6, that's 1 more transition, versus if you had 4 classes in a day, you'll have less transitions and perhaps there's more time. But I trust you when you say that the people who are tasked to do this are thinking about all the various alternatives. So thank you.
They definitely thought about that. Yeah, a lot of alternatives. They put a lot of work into it.
Good.
I could find out the end, and I could rattle off my own positives and negatives of each of these approaches, but I don't think you necessarily hear that at this point.
So I think what I'd like to request is perhaps once this has had a chance to sort of be in place for perhaps for the sort of the first half of the year or something, if we can have Dr. Urban come back and go and tell us how it has worked from an implementation standpoint. I think the board would be interested in that in that feedback. Let's sort of, as with everything, let's give things a chance to work, and then let's go and get a chance to understand what's happening.
Sure. Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments related to this?
I just have one question. I didn't look at the start time. Is it later than in past years?
It's 8:25, I think.
Yeah, it's what it's been this year. This year was the year we
Okay.
changed start time. So yeah, it's consistent.
Other questions? Okay. All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda. We're going to do the consent agenda in 2 pieces. So we're going to do items 402, 403.
David. I'm sorry, we got 2 more items.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, we got the Bristol parking lot and we got strategic planning.
You know what? I apologize. I've gone and done this the wrong order, haven't I? My apologies. All right, so we won't do that then. We'll do the Bristol parking lot next.
Yeah, did you want to intro that, David? And
yeah, sure. So he says, Steph Mac. So in prior board meetings and before the Olive and Oak moved and before the event space was put up, we were asked if we would allow the use of the Bristol parking lot for valet parking. So it would be a closely controlled, insured thing where they would where they would come and they would valets would come and move cars around there. And at that point, it wasn't completely clear if the city was going to allow permission for the event space to move forward with that. The board reached out to the community, and there were certainly people who lived around there who had sort of comments about that. The board took no action. Subsequently, the space has opened, and the only restriction it has is COVID related. So at the moment, they don't need the Bristol parking lot in order to function for the event space. But obviously, if they can use a portion of the Bristol parking lot, it's both an opportunity to get some cars off the streets in Webster, which will help from a traffic perspective. And it's obviously also, selfishly, it's an opportunity for the district to pick up some revenue as well. So wanted just to bring this back to the board. I know that there are some, board members who weren't necessarily part of that first conversation. Wanted to bring it back. The intention today is just to have a discussion about this. There is no intention to go and take a vote on whether or not we will do this or not, but more just to get a feeling from the board as to how we feel just in general about this. So I'll open it up if anybody's got any questions or any comments.
David, I was just going to add to your.
Please go ahead.
Real quickly, is that this is not something that we sought out. It's something where we were approached, I think it was Monday, somewhere not too recently, about us to reconsider this particular opportunity. So that's why it was put on the agenda this time around, just to see what the board now, with at least one new member, was thinking about this. And yeah, just wanted to add that.
And also, you might want to actually describe what's the thing about it, that I know that you and Pam reached out to people who live around the area, and perhaps you might just, before we talk, you might just describe that a little bit as well.
Yeah, so David had mentioned last time around that we had connected with some people that live around the school, all the people that border actually the property, and as well as some people that don't. And so there were some discussions that were had, and the concerns were raised. A few of them came to speak at a board meeting a couple of years ago, and the concerns were tied to noise, traffic on that particular lot, damage to the particular lot, traffic through the neighborhood. Just kind of worried about what would happen with volley drivers, and some of the neighbors live on Cedar, which is a smaller street width-wise than Gore and Gray, and concern about that. And so they had expressed concern. Bruce and I had met with them. It's been that long. And there was some email correspondence. There was one particular neighbor who was reaching out to me, I believe weekly, just to ask, has the board done anything? And he reached out a number of times, and I would always answer no, and I'll let you know if we do. If the board decides to entertain it, we're not looking to keep this a secret or anything. And so when they approached us, and David said, let's put it on the agenda. We reached out to them. Pam reached out to them, just in the spirit of transparency, the people that were copied on those emails, just to tell them, hey, it's coming back for discussion. We wanted you to know. Some of those people their comments are included in the agenda, and are on the public comments. And I know you've seen those, along with some other people who favored the particular proposal. That's kind of where we are. There's been, Pam, unless you say otherwise, we haven't spoken with anybody this time around, but there's been, Pam had some email correspondence. So that's it.
Okay, so I think that's good good feedback. Sorry, good background rather. Does anybody have any comments?
I'm just going to say that, as in years past, I'm going to abstain from this conversation.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Anybody else got any comments?
My concern was for the residents nearby, and so, I mean, obviously, if we're just now bringing up the conversation, then it's not, probably hasn't been delved into deeply. But are there any thoughts into kind of, I know at one point there was an issue, or they thought there might be an issue with where they might be parking and shining lights, like in the apartment complex there and that type of thing. Has there been any kind of thoughts to resolutions or anything about that?
You know, we have, and again, we haven't really come back to a lot of discussions on it, you know, in this particular short notice. But what we had thought about at the time, because we talked to different people, including the owner of that property, who had expressed favor with the particular proposal, the owner of the Algonquin, but that we'd limit, one of the things was to limit the number of parking spots to the spots that back up or butt up against the parking lot in that particular property, that don't come up against the homes that are along Cedar. So that would do something in terms of light. Again, it's a parking lot for a complex. And again, with this particular property, again, it's not like we're going to allow use by the restaurant for everyday parking. So you're going to have a car that gets dropped off. You're going to have a car that gets picked up. Usually it's for an event. So it's a one-time thing. It's a limited number of spots. So I don't think the light would be something. I do think some people last time had, you know, right now they're, you know, some of the noises were key fobs or doors closing. there was concerns about possible occluding with the time of the night, tow trucks if tow trucks needed. So there were some concerns there, but so that was kind of the solution, was to park them in that particular spot proximity wise. And then our direction at the time was wanting them to, when they came out of Gray or came out on the Gore side, to go towards Lockwood, so that they wouldn't be going towards Cedar, towards where the residential areas were. In consultation with Doug, that's not something where we can, tell the cars where to go. It's something legally, from a legal agreement standpoint. Now, certainly, one of the things that we favored and have expressed all along, that is if there's something, if how this agreement is applied or how it looks, we have concerns with or worries about, just having that out clause that allows us to back out of it. It didn't work. So.
Thanks for that, John. That would be one of my concerns, is that we wouldn't be locked into something long-term if that's not working for us, for the neighbors.
Absolutely.
Other comments? So oh, sorry, Alan, go ahead.
One question, and I know this would probably be part of the legal agreement, but just having sort of tight controls on liability and insurance and those types of things so that the district is protected. I think that's really important.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, my feeling about this is that they don't need this in order to move ahead. They're going to have the cars. The cars are going to be on the streets, and if we can get a few cars off the streets, I think that's a good thing. Even for the reality is that even the people who sort of live around there. I think at the same time, yes, if we can demonstrate care and concern for the people who live nearest to the parking lot that's going to be used, that would be helpful as well. I suspect that if we don't have this and don't have control, that at least some people are probably going to actually go and park in that lot anyway at times. It's not going to be something they'll do with sort of school permission, but at some point people just sort of park everywhere, I'm afraid. But I do think if it's a source of revenue that we can have without additional sort of pain for the district, then we could treble our deficit, we could treble our profits for or our surplus for next year very easily. Now, I mean, I don't know how much money is going to be involved, but I mean, as we've seen, obviously we've got being fiscally prudent is something that's important as well. So it's a balance, but to my mind, the idea that we're not that this doesn't require this to move forward. I mean, to my mind, I'm absolutely keen on you going forward and exploring this further and perhaps coming back with a proposal. Alex, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, do we know what the alternative is? I mean, is it truly that there's just going to be cars lined up in the neighborhood anyways? And I guess I see one of the chief concerns is just the noise, and that there's going to be cars in the parking lot near where there currently aren't, and near where in a more mainly residential area. But if there's going to be cars there regardless, is that I guess I'm just trying to understand, what is the alternative for the restaurant? Do we know that?
I mean, they have a parking plan in place, which includes parking nearby on the streets, but they also have agreements with a lot of different businesses. I think one of the benefits of this is our ability, and we've never said that we would just allow them to use the whole parking lot. But Webster, we don't have a lot of big parking lots. But so if we were to be able to give them 40 to 50 spaces, that's a healthy number that could be used, as opposed to going to a lot of different places. I will just comment on, we did get a comment today from somebody who I don't know, who identifies themselves as a transportation professional, and who had mentioned that just what her words were, as an engineer, I can tell you that valet parking reduces traffic, congestion, noise, and emissions that are created by patrons circling the district. We'll do this to find acceptable parking. And so while the impact is on the people that live next door, certainly have empathy for that and understanding for it. But I think we're thinking broader. Again, from this person's perspective, it's possible. And she also noted, just from a sustainability standpoint, the use of shared parking is something that is sustainable when you think about, instead of adding different concrete and parking, and you think about water and water runoff and things like that. That was kind of her stance, which is something I never even thought of. So.
Other questions? Go ahead, Christine.
Well, one of the first things I wrote down when I saw this was liability. So I just wanted to echo what Alan said, that, what prudent, we do want to be prudent, and certainly would hope that would be one thing we're looking into for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So my sense, and again, if I'm incorrect, please let me know. My sense is that the board is open to you going and talking further to the folks to coming back with a proposal. That proposal needs to address what we're doing to try to mitigate the minimum, to mitigate the impact on the people who live sort of right by that. It needs to be clear that that how we're addressing insurance liability and all of those issues. It needs to tell us, what the revenue impact is going to is going to be as well, and it needs to be clear that it needs to outline the length of time for which we are initially committing to do this, and so that we'll have the ability to go and review that. Anything I have, Alan, go ahead.
Just had one other thing to, I guess, sort of clarify too, John. If we were to go down this path, I sort of see this as putting together parameters, right, that other businesses could then come use to use the parking lot as well. It's not like we're doing this exclusively just for one business or one restaurant. Is that correct?
Our agreement would be exclusive, but this would not require us to be exclusive with one business. So we're not looking to enter into any exclusive use of the parking lot with this particular group. So anybody could do it and, rent the space.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So any other considerations anybody would like to see if as John and Pam go and talk to them further? Okay, so so you have your marching orders there, and then at a future board meeting, you'll come back and you'll let us know what's going on, and we will make sure that we give plenty of advance warning on that before that's going to come back up, just so that if there are other comments, and obviously just as a result of this, if anybody has any comments they want to provide either to the board or to Dr. Simpson or Ms. Frazier, then please go ahead and do so. Okay, next, strategic planning, goal priorities, and measurements.
Yeah, so
Hey,
one of the...
Okay, Alex, sorry.
I'm sorry. I just thought of one, just one last thing. I'm sorry.
No, absolutely, go ahead.
Did you mention, I'm sorry if you did, but did you mention why the delay in, I mean, we heard about this quite a while ago. So just to help understand, what happened between now and I think to me, it feels like it was probably the pandemic, and that's why it was delayed, but I just wanted to, ask the question.
Yeah, I would say, there wasn't at that point, it was delayed. There wasn't a real sense of urgency. If I remember right, I'm not sure that the parking plan and structure had been finalized. I don't think it had for that particular group. And so from our end, again, it wasn't something that had any level of urgency, and then the pandemic hit. So then it just became not a priority for anybody at that point. But since they've been allowed to open up their space to a certain percentage at this point, they returned. And so, yeah, so that's it.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear. I know there were some questions and public comments about, why the long pause. I think that answers it.
Yeah.
So I think the other thing is that at the point, before the parking plan was in place, it was a question of, do they need this from the district in order to go ahead? And the change that's happened now is they've got permission. That the only restriction they have at the moment is COVID. The parking plan they have within the district does not require this. So it's about how do you get some more cars off the street? Is there revenue that's available? What are the downsides of doing that? Thank you. Okay, any other questions about that? Okay, all right, now then, planning goal priorities and measurements.
Yeah,
Dr.
so
Simpson.
just coming back to you, I presented on kind of the process a month or two ago. And again, we had kind of started walking this walk in the winter, right, and then COVID hit. And so what we had talked about was having the board that ultimately approves goals, priorities, and metrics, but that doesn't improve or doesn't approve, but ultimately informs and gives kind of blessing to our actions to get at those particular goals. It was also important to the board that we list particular metrics that we are going to evaluate the success of our efforts on a regular basis as part of this particular plan. The cover page of the document that I had shared with you kind of outlined some of the process, some of the different feedback that's been given by different groups that includes different constituents of the district. Tonight, what I'm asking you to do is to approve the goal, the priorities, and the measurements. I'll speak to those in a second. June 10th, along with asking you to giving you a report on all the big work, the actual work that's going to happen in the district, and to move us in the direction of these priorities, to inform the metrics, not necessarily just next year, but over time. That will come to you on June 10th, as well as the opportunity for you to see the alignment with these priorities and goal in both the budget that Pam prepares, as well as our district professional learning plan, which is pretty big. Then we will operationalize the plan, but then in the fall, when we're able to all gather, bring together a diverse group of stakeholders to review the plan, the progress towards the plan, and then get more involvement in also how do we make the plan better moving forward. Again, I highlighted that last year, even pre-pandemic, the importance of making this an annual process and not doing the traditional 3-year strategic plan, because as COVID has shown us, as well as many other things change in a hurry and you have to adapt in a hurry. So what are your core things that you're always going to prioritize? And then you can measure, and then what are the strategies that continue to evolve? So with that, listing the central goal of our school system for next year, again, you've read this, is to promote a culture of dignity in which learners feel included and a sense of belonging so they may flourish as both human beings as students. Again, nurturing our people, not just our children, but our staff in such a way. How we do this, how we promote such a culture, is to really focus on policies, structures, systems, and practices that further social, emotional, physical well-being of people, educational excellence, where we are a school system, so we have to provide the highest quality of education for all of our students, and then how we do this work together, which is that connecting and collaboration piece. And that's not just with our folks internally, meaning our staff, but that's with our partners, that's with our parents, that's with all the other different agencies and groups that we need to work with to try and meet the needs of our kids. Those are our 3 priorities. Does that mean that we don't still prioritize being wise with our funds, trying to have a sustainable budget? something that we can continue to do in a way that honors the resources and somewhat the scarcity of resources in our district? No, that's still a huge priority. But just as continuing to prove our communication, things that hit all of these different areas. So there'll be a piece of how we develop this plan that speaks to some of those infrastructure things, but these goals all center around our work with our children. They're things that are closer to the work with our children. So how we'll evaluate that particular process is those particular measures that are followed. Some of them, I'm not going to go over all of them. Some of them include actual products that will be evaluations that progress was made in the school system towards these goals because these products are now in place or these processes are now in place. And the other thing is looking to see movement in some of the data too. I did not align kind of data with the priority because that ignores the fact of the intersectionality and the interrelatedness of these priorities on our children and on these particular data points. So for example, you could easily, you might want to assign grades to the academic excellence. Well, academic excellence is also easier accomplished if I feel that I'm seen, if I'm healthy, if I'm well. That will support academic excellence. So the plan is not to, again, some of them more closely align with one priority or the next, but to when we report on this data regularly along with the progress, just to show the data holistically and how are we doing towards creating this kind of school system that we want. Two of the data points that I want to point out that I think are really, really, really huge are one, like we told the board as part of the ABAR policy, is having that diversity, equity, and inclusion survey data and how we survey district stakeholders, including our children, to see about that sense of belonging that they feel. Do they feel included? And not just from their experience with the teacher, but how does it show up in things like curriculum? How does it show up in experiences or opportunities? Looking at that data and seeing how that data moves over the course of the school year is going to help guide our work, as is looking at social emotional learning data. How are our students communicating again, and how are we able to evaluate and act on their wellness and what they share? So I won't go into explaining all of those, but included in that is data like I mentioned, you'll see their feedback, DCI, CLT, PLC, that's really educational-like language. That is our kind of professional learning centers that we do. And that's when our professional learning communities, that's when staff get together to problem solve how they can better support the needs of all their students or how they can support students in going beyond what's being taught or possibly remediation. They give feedback on how they function as a particular team. So again, evaluating and using that data to see how are we partnering with one another to improve our practices. So with that, I'll give you an opportunity. So tonight, what you would be doing is approving the goal, the priorities, and those particular measurements. And again, we would come back to you on the 10th that shows all of the hows as it relates to this, the strategy related to this.
Questions or comments? Christine.
Hi. So I appreciate these. And I guess one thing that I would want you to be thinking about, and that maybe you could come back with us if my colleagues agree, but is how will we communicate these goals and priorities so that people both inside as well as outside the district understand our long-term vision?
John, you're muted.
Thank you, Christine. We'll make that a part of our presentation, how we when we come back to you next. It's a great question. That's critically important.
Other questions or comments? So I will tell you, I am glad to see clearly that as we're talking about educational excellence, that we're including some of the some of the more obvious measures that you have there as well. So the AP dual credit, enrollment, things like that that we're doing at the high school. Certainly, standardized test data has to be taken carefully, but it is still important, and it is something that that people understand. So I'm glad to see that that is there, and similarly, some of the other measures you've got that perhaps sort of fall into sort of the more traditional measures of success, as well as these newer categories you've got. And so I'm just glad to see we're drawing from a broad variety of areas in terms of how we sort of measure and think about success.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll just add that I think especially this coming up year, it's really important that we have those social, emotional, and physical well-being items in the list, because I think that's going to be as important as anything in the year to come.
I agree.
Any other comments? Okay, in which case, looking for a motion to approve the goals, the priorities, and the methods of measurement.
So, hey, David, sorry to do it again.
No, go ahead.
I just needed the time to think about it.
Please, I'm not looking to rush anybody.
So I guess one of the questions that I have, I guess I could see it on here, and maybe I'm thinking too at a lower level as opposed to the strategic level. Is there enough focus in this on the arts? I feel like just our district, our school district, kind of does a very good job of including the arts and also innovation and that mindset that is kind of the bread and butter, if you will, of a lot of the things that we've done lately. So I'm just curious, I just didn't see any wording on that and any ways to measure that necessarily. And sorry, that's kind of a curveball because I could have.
No. And I think those are good points. I think some of the information regarding information or innovation can come up in some of the different survey data that we would collect, and the extracurricular participation could be something. I do think that's something that we could think about, Alex. I certainly very much support that. And so let me think about that. Again, that was some of the extracurricular piece we thought was those things that doesn't necessarily support music or success measures within the class. We could look at participation in courses. I don't know. I'm open to suggestions though, but my team could think about that, if that's something should be added.
Yeah, I'm not expecting you to have the answer right now, but yeah, I'd appreciate if you would think about it.
Yeah.
For me, at least, one of the keys is going to be when you come back with something that fleshes all of this out and says, okay, what is it you're actually going to do? So you've got a series of goals here. It seems to me that you are hitting sort of critical points that we need to measure. So we've got, the more traditional sort of academic aspects that we want to hit, but at the same time, we've got these other areas that as a board we've also said are important. So the diversity and inclusion data, discipline data, and trying to improve outcomes there, and these various other items as well. So I'm interested. For me, at least, that seems like an inclusive list. How you do it's what I want to get, and in that respect, I'll be very interested to the point that Alex has made to hear what you have to say there. Christine, did you have something you wanted to say?
Well, yeah, mine was procedural. So I agree with Alex. I think these are interesting things, and I'm wondering, what are other districts that would consider themselves innovative or creative? How are they measuring that? And if we were to agree to that, how would that change the recommended action? would we just be approving the goal and priorities? Would we be approving goal, priorities, and measurements, but then understanding that some might be added later? How does that work?
Yeah, I think you could go, yeah, you could do either way. We could see, I've never heard of any data other than participation data from a district standpoint, but of course my knowledge is limited as one human being. So we could look and see how other people are doing it, and we could come back to you. That's clearly a question. So we could approve what's on here, and we could come back to you with, to report on it and possibly recommend an addition of measurements. And again, this wasn't necessarily either, is not necessarily, I mean, while these are approved and these are things that we would look at, doesn't necessarily mean that we just stop right there if we, again, we learn better ways of measuring or other things. But these are kind of the guaranteed. So we can look into that before, especially the June meeting, and just see what else exists. That'll be easy.
Yeah, maybe it's not going all the way, but you know, there's certain schools that specialize in the arts and things like that. And I don't know that we necessarily need to go that far, but I'd be curious how they measure that and if there's things we can incorporate. But yeah, I'm good. I hear you.
Yeah, that's a good, those are great ideas. Great ideas. We're on it.
Okay, so, all right. So to the point that's been raised, I think we view this as an evolving document, so that certainly my sense at the moment is we're approving, you know, the idea that you have put out here. You're going to come back to us with you know, the flesh that sits underneath these bones, and at that point we'll certainly have another opportunity to say, okay, we think that as you do this now, there's clearly some other things that you need to be including here, and perhaps there's some things that aren't stated in quite the same way.
Yeah.
And if, yeah, I mean, I think if everybody concur, if we concur that that is the way of doing things, that would be good. All right. In which case, I will entertain a motion to approve the goal, priorities, and measurements as outlined.
Make a motion to approve the 2021-2022 strategic planning goal, priorities, and measurements as outlined.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Alex. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And anybody opposed? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I say, and again, something just look forward to hearing more back from you about that as you start to develop that in more detail.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Am I okay to move on with the consent agenda?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, no, I apologize. Okay, so we're going to break the consent agenda into two parts. We will cover consent agenda item 4.06, one of the personnel reports separately. And so I'll entertain a motion to approve consent agenda item 4.06.
We approve consent agenda item 4.06.
Okay, and a second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Keita. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? And any abstentions?
I abstain.
Okay, and so Christine and Amy are both abstaining. Thank you. And then I will entertain a motion to approve the balance of the consent agenda set.
Make a motion, excuse me, to approve consent agenda items 4.02, 4.03, 4.04, 4.05, and 4.07.
Yep. Okay. And can I get a second? Thank you, Alex. And all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? And any abstentions? Okay. Thank you very much. That passes. Okay, I will now entertain a motion to recess into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel.
So moved.
Alex, and a second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Keita. And can I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Addison,
Yes.
Mrs. Dahl,
Yes.
Ms. Clendenin. She abstaining.
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Keller,
Yes.
Ms. Quinn,
Yes.
Mr. Khan,
Yes.
Mr. Todd.
Yes.
Okay.